To have a good enemy, choose a friend. They will know where to strike where it hurts the most. Diane de Poitiers, 1499 to 1566, mistress of Henry II of France. In the mid-9th century BC, a young man named Michael III ascended to the throne of the Byzantine Empire. His mother, Empress Theodora, had been exiled to a monastery. The conspiracy to overthrow Theodora and enthrone Michael had been led by his uncle Bardas, a shrewd and ambitious man. Michael was an inexperienced ruler. In these dangerous times, he needed someone he could trust. He immediately thought of Basil, his best friend. Basil had no experience in politics and government. He was the head of the royal stables. But he had repeatedly demonstrated his loyalty and gratitude to Michael. The two men had met some years earlier when Michael was visiting the stables, and a wild horse panicked and began to run out of control towards him. Basil, a young rider from Macedonia, saved Michael's life by controlling the runaway horse. The strength and courage of the young man impressed Michael so much that he immediately promoted Basil from a humble horse trainer to the position of head of the royal stables. Basil was sent to the best school in Byzantium, and the rough peasant boy became a cultured and pleasant courtier. As emperor, Michael needed someone by his side who would be absolutely loyal to him. Who better to entrust with the delicate position of chamberlain and chief advisor than the young man who owed everything he had become to him? Basil could be trained for his new job, and Michael loved him like a brother. Basil learned quickly and easily, and soon he was able to advise the emperor on all state matters. Exposed to the luxuries and splendors of Byzantine court life, he became greedy and ambitious. Michael doubled and then tripled his salary, granted him a noble title, and married him to one of his own mistresses. Bardas had become the head of the army, and Basil convinced Michael that this man was infinitely ambitious. With the illusion of being able to control his nephew, Bardas had conspired to put him on the throne. Nothing stopped him from conspiring again, this time to depose Michael and assume the government of the empire himself. Basil did and said so much against Bardas that finally Michael decided to have his uncle murdered. During an important horse race, Basil approached Bardas in the midst of the crowd and stabbed him to death. Shortly afterward, he requested to replace him as head of the army in order to better control the armed forces and suppress any rebellion attempts. Basil's power and fortune grew, and a few years later, Michael, who was in financial trouble due to his own extravagances, asked him to return some of the money that Basil had borrowed over the years. To the great dismay of the young emperor, Basil refused so firmly and arrogantly that he suddenly realized the problem he faced. His former stable master had come to possess more money, more allies in the army and the Senate, and ultimately more power than the emperor himself. A few weeks later, after a night of heavy drinking, Michael woke up surrounded by soldiers. Basil looked on impassively as his men stabbed the emperor to death. After proclaiming himself emperor, he rode through the streets of Byzantium, triumphantly carrying on a long pike the head of his former benefactor and best friend. Lord, protect me from my friends. I can take care of my enemies. Voltaire, 1694 to 1778.